Isn't it funny how you don't have permission to impersonate me online? Andre Cordova.
I'm ethnically ambiguous comedian AJ Lamarque.
And welcome to
Sabotage.
Hi, AJ.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. I know it's wonderful to be in my presence. So...
I want to start by saying you've joined the soft drink.
Yeah.
So when you invited me, you were like, oh, like, you're a Cab Sav type of person. I was like, oh, I don't drink. And I think I just fundamentally undermined your entire podcast. So thank you.
Yeah, how dare you?
How dare you?
You're
I've
only
ruined
like the third guest to have done that. I don't know. I think people are getting kind of entitled about it.
I put the sabotage in sabotage.
Yeah, that's sabotaging the premise of the podcast. I'm not sponsored here. I just like to drink this if it's not alcohol.
I'll cover the Gatorade. What is this randomly ambiguous orange?
You've already like finished it.
Rations. That's what it was. I was like day 44. I'm still walking around Alexandria. These roads are so long.
Low. The subject today, by the way, is live comedy, which is why we have a comedian in our midst. I don't know, self-proclaimed though. He could be lying.
Anyone can call themselves a comedian. There is no license you have to get. There is no proof that you could.
There's no way to fact check that.
No, you don't even have to be funny sometimes. You just have to say you're a comedian.
People do that, like IRL.
That's what Twitter is, isn't it? Like Twitter is just being like, I'm a comedian, take a joke. Which I hate Twitter. I loathe Twitter.
Oh, yeah. I think any reasonable person loathes Twitter.
Yeah. And I was excited for the kind of resurgence of Threads, and then that died after like a week. Threads. Well, it's not dead as in like the app still works, but like everyone was so excited.
Oh,
and
Threads.
posting.
I thought you said Freds. I was like, what the fuck is that?
Oh, no. So I've got a very kind of working class British pronunciation.
I picked up on that.
The instead of the.
It has already, from my point of view, fallen into obscurity. Like, I've forgotten about Threads the same way I've, forget to tweet shit.
Yeah, I posted something the other day and I was like, hey, is anyone still on here? Did post get views? Am I doing it wrong? And then it got like 1 like and I was like, yep, all of the above is true. No one's on here. I am doing it wrong.
So, self-proclaimed comedian. How did you start? And when? What happened?
I don't know. Psychologists are still trying to figure it out. But, actually...
When did the voices begin?
Well, I think what happened was, so I moved to Australia properly in 2016.
Okay.
From the UK. And I didn't know anyone. And Sydney is, if you've never had to move to Sydney and you've not experienced that as someone who's not from here, Sydney is a very difficult city to crack socially. The kind of way Sydney-siders work is a lot about your friendship groups from school and your close-knit family friends community. And there isn't really much necessarily openness to new people joining in the way that other big cities.
Nepotism.
Cronyism, nepotism, all of it. I was thinking of ways that I could actually meet people and socialize and hang out. So I started doing improv classes.
Right.
And it wasn't really for the sake of doing comedy per se. You fool around for a little bit, but people are chatty, It's about being open and friendly and social. And so I was like, oh, that would be a great way. It's like an 8-week course at this like improv school in the city. That's like 8 weeks of hanging out with the same people. And then from there, I just ended up getting into comedy by default. Kind of slowly find yourself in the world without actively thinking, this is what I'm doing.
Right.
It just appeared around me by just being like, I want to go have friends. And
just kind of going with the flow of it.
Yeah. I can imagine that happens in a lot of industries as well. It's like, you don't necessarily be, I'm going to go be a musician, but it's like you go to gigs, you enjoy the experience, you're hanging with friends, you're chatting to people, you end up meeting someone who's the guitarist, you end up doing like the DJ, like not doing the DJ. I don't know. In the gay scene, maybe you're doing the DJ, but all of a sudden, they're your community. They're the people you're around. And so the idea of them becoming a musician or a comedian or a singer or something like that isn't unreasonable or out of the question. It's just saying, like
the natural next step almost.
Yeah, exactly.
So with that transition to stand-up, how was your first, kind of real gig in that realm?
At the time I was doing drag and I was asked as a drag performer to do a lot of hosting gigs.
Okay.
And so there was this weird kind of crossover where in my head I was like, well, hosting is not stand-up.
Yeah.
Stand-up is very different to hosting. And it is. But fundamentally what I was doing without realizing it, it was that I was going on stage by myself with a microphone and an audience just staring at me, and I would fill in the time between the acts. And like in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, all I've got to do is rock up, go, oh, next up we have Joel, he's on the guitar, give it up for Joel. And then you come back out and you do the same thing for the next performer. And then in between, you know, I vibed, you know, an energy in the room or someone dropped something and you're in
throwing in little jokes and stuff.
Yeah. And then after a while, I was like, oh, like I was doing it, but I didn't name it. So I didn't come to that kind of confrontational idea where it's like, oh, I could never do stand-up's not for me. I fell into it because I didn't name it and I didn't articulate it, so therefore the barrier didn't exist.
It's giving I don't do labels.
Ironically, in the comedy world, and particularly in the stand-up world, the host job is actually quite difficult and quite important to the whole night. It's one of the roles that generally on a show you would get paid for. You don't necessarily get paid to do stand-up comedy all the time, but a headliner and an MC will generally be paid because their jobs are more difficult. You've got to control the atmosphere. You've got to
You're the glue.
You're the glue that holds it all together. And especially if, you know, people are paying tickets to come and watch, the person who's running the room or the comedy venue goes, well, we want them to come back. Yeah. And we want them to have a good time. Because
they need a good host,
We need a good host.
Did it go well? Your first?
Yeah, because I'm brilliant. And no, I mean, I work with a lot of comedians and I also run this program every 6 months where I it's called a newcomers program where I get people in to try stand up. So,
I was going to bring that up later. Let's talk about it now. No, it's fine. It's okay. Go.
And like the idea of that is to get people to try stand up in a no pressure environment, but to give them all the kind of foundations of like, this is actually what the industry is like. Here's how you get gigs. Okay. Here's how you hold a microphone. Here's how you get on stage. Here's how you shake the MC's hand when you go up. Like very practical. It's like a TAFE course for stand up. It's much more just as how you physically do it. Just give it a go and we'll provide a good environment. And what I say during the newcomers program to all of the comedians that participate, and we've been running it for about 3 or 4 years now, and it's a free program. Each workshop, when I chat to them, I'm like, you will always look back at your first set and be like, oh my God, how bad was that? Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean it didn't do the job of making people laugh. You've just got better with your skill. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people going with a very perfectionist attitude. It's like, it's my first ever set and I'm going to win and I'm going to I'm going to figure it all out and then I'm going to see my 5 minutes and going to put me on my Netflix special and then going to go, you are the one, you are the chosen Messiah, here is the world. And like, you know, sometimes you think, you know, it's that whole kind of Sabrina the Teenage Witch moment. I'm maybe showing my age, but everyone in my generation was kind of waiting until their 16th birthday to be like, maybe I'm a witch. Maybe I've got magical powers. When I wake up on my 16th birthday, I'll be floating above my bed. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the chosen one. And so when I first was doing stand-up for myself, in kind of relation to how I perform now and how I write now, it was bad. But like my job to get on stage and make an audience laugh did the job.
Yes.
And I wasn't like the best, like, award-winning, blah, blah.
Yeah, but like you didn't bomb either. So
no, it's like I had the fundamental skills to get on stage for 5 minutes and make people laugh. And then someone who was a pro for doing it 5 years could use that same 5 minute spot and go hard. You know what I mean?
In relation to this, like, newcomer program you've got, what percentage of them would you say are naturally, like, hilarious or funny? You know, versus, I guess, what the average experience might be.
Yeah, and that's there's this kind of thing in comedy which a comedian, Beck Charwood, articulated to me. In comedy, you're generally some sort of percentage split between two columns. Okay. You are either a writer or a performer. And you're varying levels of balance. So some people I know, they are impeccable writers. They can, the way they use words and the punchlines and how they put things together and how they do those ideas is incredible.
But then they can't deliver.
So on stage, you get this essence that's like, oh, it's great, but you've got to perform. It's still a performing art. And you know, a lot of those people end up in writers' rooms. Other times you have people who are the opposite. They are the performer, and their jokes might be very basic.
Yeah.
They could be stuff that, like, you feel like, you know, when you hang out with your mates at the bar, you're like, we could write that.
Yeah.
Like, we're doing that right now. This is what's going on.
Yeah.
But they've got such a level of charisma and, like, personality and just the way they say things. And it's like, you could say anything. Like, you do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But I'm just liking your vibe. Like,
Yes.
go off, like, have fun,
Love
like,
that,
enjoy,
yeah.
live, laugh, love, you know, all of that. If you are a writer predominantly, you can train yourself to perform. And if you're a performer, you can train yourself to write.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's practice makes perfect.
Oh, 100%.
Kind of regardless of the industry or situation. A lot of it's like that.
Yeah.
I think it can be very easy to feel envious or jealous of people who have
Yeah.
natural talent in something. But I'll tell you what, because with music, the similar thing applies.
Yeah.
You can have great writers, great performers. Sometimes that doesn't translate the other way around. I went to like a music uni and stuff, and I've been around a lot of singers. It's crazy just like how competitive they are, firstly. I don't know why, but I guess just because people suck in this country and tall poppy syndrome is such a big deal.
Yeah.
That like there is just envy and jealousy if you perceive someone else as like better than you are.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make with this is there is natural talent, and I in the past have been envious of that. But there's such a stark difference between that and like hearing someone sing with soul,
Yeah.
right? That's 1,000 times better, because then you begin to realize over time, like, okay, you got a bunch of people here who can sing, cool, but that doesn't make you interesting to listen to.
Yeah.
It's when you can feel it, that's like next level. And it took me a long time to realize, mostly because I didn't have any like a support network or anyone kind of there for me to build me up, etc. I'm the one with soul when I sing. Like I've had people tell me when I do perform, like I could just feel that. Like that was a whole experience. And it took time for me to train my voice as well. Like I wasn't naturally like 100% out the gate, able to do all these runs in these notes and stuff. I personally dislike runs. I don't know, like it's so stupid.
Wow, you're a bad gay man.
No, because it's so, you know what it is? It's so oversaturated.
Yeah.
In music, the number of singers who throw runs in for no fucking reason on every line, it drives me mental. I'm like, bitch, I don't know what you're singing because you're just climbing ladders with your voice. Just over and over again.
So are runs like the hack comedy of the music world? It's just
For
like
sure.
it can get a
It's-
reaction, it can get a laugh.
Yeah.
But do you need to do it all the time?
Exactly. It's like, okay, what's your next trick, bitch? Like,
No,
That's
the
the thing.
authenticity is such a big thing, and it's very much the same thing in the comedy world. And I think where comedy is slightly different with music, like there's the concept of pitch and there's a concept of a quantitative nature to musicality, which means that you can say that was correct or that wasn't. And it's still ambiguous.
Yeah.
But with comedy, there's
no right way to do it.
pitch for comedy.
When it comes to creative endeavors, like, bottom line, you got to figure out what works for you. You can take inspiration from others and you can take the layout that others have used, but trying to impersonate or like do things the way that they do to a T, thinking that that's going to garner you success or be the answer to fucking the universe, like it just doesn't work, because people can always tell when you're not being authentic.
Yeah.
And I think as a society, we naturally have this resentment towards that. Like it's actually really interesting, because I don't know if you know, I don't watch much reality TV at all, but The Circle on Netflix is like this social media based thing, and they've done a few seasons of it already. But like what always happens is, so the contestants can either be themselves or they can catfish, pretend to be somebody else.
Is this the one Bag of Chips is on?
That does
It's
ring a
where
bell.
they're in their own rooms
Yeah.
and you voice call each other.
It's all via text and stuff. They don't
Oh, okay.
voice
Maybe
call.
there's a slightly different
Yeah.
version in the UK. I saw a clip on TikTok of Bag of Chips on it. And she's like supposed to be a cleaning professional. And
Right.
someone is asking her how to clean. And she's
Low.
like, I don't fucking no. It's like, use a sponge. Like, you know, so she's trying to act like this person. Anyway, sorry, I did the circle.
Yeah, so the thing that always happens though is everyone is determined to catch the catfish. Because like, I just found that interesting because I'm like, no one's telling them to do that, and they themselves could be catfishes, and yet like everyone has just unanimously agreed, even though they're not interacting with each other outside of these specified, you know, social media times, that anyone who's not being authentic should be kicked out.
Yeah.
So when you apply that to a real world scenario of like, well, if you're not being yourself on stage, especially as a performer, it's gonna get old real quick, and people will pick up on that, and they'll be like, you're not really who I thought you were.
I think comedy is a heightened example because it goes back to personal safety and survival on some sort of mechanism, right? So if you are in a stand-up gig, you are potentially in a pub somewhere. You may or may not know that comedy was supposed to be on. You, as an audience member, are hoping that the person who picks up the mic and takes a level of authority in the room and takes a position of power above everyone else in the room because they are holding a microphone, their voice is amplified, a platform. Everyone is listening to them. You have innate trust and hope that they're not going to be dangerous. They're not going to make you feel exposed. They're not going to verbally or physically attack you. They're not going to use that position of power in a negative way. And at best, like, you know, they're going to use it to really move the room and lead it and bring it up. And so when someone comes on with an energy that's nervous, an energy that doesn't seem like them, that authenticity and energy that seems like maybe they're playing a character and the whole purpose of the character is to use that tension to get laughs. But the audience will spend about the first 7 seconds to 15 seconds trying to get a gauge on, can I trust this person?
Yeah.
Or am I going to have to sit for the next 5 minutes and be like, oh gosh, I can't believe he's saying this. Do I get out? Oh my God, this is awkward and embarrassing. Or, oh great, they're laughing at me and like they're making a joke out of my community, or people who look like me, or they've picked on me. And so like that level of authenticity, I think, comes back to that kind of primal instinct to be like, am I safe in this social setting?
Yeah.
My
comes
flight
down to
and
trust.
flight or freeze response is going off right now. And until it's settled, I won't be settled.
Yeah, it'll just be uncomfortable.
I think because comedy and stand-up comedy has a lot of accessibility. It's if you ask comedians, I think 50% of them will say, this is not a performing arts. Get over yourself. We're talking in a pub. And the other half will go, no, this is very much an art form. This is very much about writing and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, both mindsets are fine as long as you're happy and you're doing your job. But ultimately, because it's so accessible, there's actually not particularly a big funding world in comedy. There is no kind of schools per se, like a NIDA equivalent. There's no great esteemed school to learn comedy. In fact, if you go and study in a school to learn stand-up, a lot of stand-up comedians will kind of look down on you. It's like the opposite. You will absolutely not get a penny in Australia for saying, I want to write a stand-up show. They're like, great, go do it and leave me alone. And so you just have to learn on the job. And if you observe something, it's like what you were saying. You learn on the job, and if you observe something, you're like, great, but someone may have known that as an industry thing for years. And if they just told you, you got to say 3 years of figuring out yourself. Yeah. Which again comes back to why I ran that newcomers program, because we just download all of the information that me and the other comedians like wish someone would have told us. Yes. In our first gig.
Rather than everyone having to be like their own guinea pig to figure things out. It's so good to have like, because it is difficult in these industries, like the side of music where it's like a similar thing that I've done is regarding PR. So I spent an entire year doing PR for my own music. Like I had this kind of structured in a way where I'd release my debut album, Psychotic. Check it out on Spotify. And each month was dedicated to a different song. So I was going through promoting each track, figuring out what works, what doesn't, getting like Spotify playlisting and all this kind of stuff. And it went great, but I put in so much work compared to a majority of artists who get so excited about creating new music and then releasing it and then thinking fucking magic happens where everyone's gonna hear it out of nowhere. And it's like, it doesn't work like that. You have to acknowledge that there is this behind the scenes business side to it.
Then you probably have to figure out the finances and become your own sort of accountant, because if you're buying stuff, you're going to claim it on tax, you're getting invoices in, you've got to learn that. Then also then you've got to market yourself, you've got to put yourself forward, you've got to reach out and do stakeholder management and PR. So you're a PR and marketing agency, you're a singer, you're everything.
What I discovered as well, there are so many scams out there. Like that's a massive problem in the music industry, especially when you're an independent artist and you're just so desperate for people to hear your work. Like you just want to get it out there.
Yeah.
And there are so many scams offering you that opportunity where like it's just, you know, you lose a lot of finances. So
yeah, I can imagine, especially because the idea of becoming a singer is much more mainstream.
Like I've thought this for a while, but there are very limited options with music education in this country. So even the few options that are available are inherently scams. They charge way too fucking much to be like educating on music, especially when I've been through one in particular, complete waste of time. Anything that I've achieved after that, I did myself. There's probably one class, one course in the 3 years that I was there, which benefit me in any regard. And that was actually sort of the basics, the foundation of the marketing side.
Yeah.
And that was a subject that I chose just to test out. So like the rest of it, complete waste of time. I didn't even get support from some of the educators who I felt were actually holding me back instead. They were heavily critical of me compared to my peers for no fucking reason. I've got a gripe about that because I don't think it was coincidental.
It's interesting because I think that stems back to a bigger conversation that I think is beyond the art form, and that is what is the role of paid education. And I was having this conversation with, ironically, a professor a few weeks ago. You know, universities are now kind of positioned as a way to get a job. That's not where universities started. Universities are an exploration of thought and ideas in a particular topic. Kind of like when people complain, oh, no one ever taught me to do taxes at school. Yeah. It's not about learning practical things. It's about exploring your mind and understanding the theoretical concepts. And, you know,
at the same time, I mean, I still would have very much preferred some practicality from school, because like, here's the thing, right? If we had all been taught to do our own taxes, like how to do that, we wouldn't need to pay anyone for it. And by extension, we wouldn't be getting scammed from the ATO themselves. So that's the reason that I think they don't want to teach us these things, because there is a benefit to the upper class keeping the rest of us dumb and like ill-informed. So as well, there was like, I've lost my train of thought. Let's end that part there. Oh God, the beauty of ADHD, bro.
Every comedian has ADHD. There is not a comedian that I know that someone's like, I don't have ADHD. That is, you don't remember that, like in that one show you did on Tuesday in July, that someone said a little bit about this, and then 2 months later you were kind of inspired. Yeah, it's not plagiarism, but it's that like,
it'd be so hard to keep track. Like I struggle enough with this podcast where we'll film and I've spent like 40 minutes to an hour discussing a subject, and then by the time we get around to editing, I'm like, I don't remember a thing I said. And I'm like watching it for the first time. Like, I mean, literally, but as if I wasn't there. So it's
I feel you. But ADHD was the cultural zeitgeist this year for Melbourne International Comedy Festival.
Really?
There was a lot. I felt like there was a lot about ADHD in 2021. There was a lot about COVID. Naturally, that was an obvious one.
I think it's kind of nice though, because it is bringing mental health to the forefront. Like this is a lot more common than you think. Yeah, and it actually can get a little annoying. Like recently, I've heard a person or two say, like when I've just casually mentioned, like, oh, sorry about like my memory, like ADHD. They're like, oh, every gay has ADHD. And I'm like,
that's bad, but it's kind of funny.
Like, yeah, it's kind of funny, but I'm like, well, like it's not fun for me. So
no, there's a lot of, I mean, yeah, it's very interesting because it just feels like everyone I talk to has ADHD, and I feel that just by virtue of, I think maybe it's an arts thing as well. It draws a certain mind.
The neurodivergent definitely tend to steer more towards the arts.
Yeah,
I think. I mean, like that's not even my like primary condition, because I've got BPD, which people still don't know about. So I'm like hoping as well through this platform and this podcast, like it's been nice having people say, oh, like, I love when you guys talk about BPD because it doesn't get enough, like, you know, awareness and things. Because, yeah, it's, I don't know, everyone seems so focused on the other ones, but BPD is like incredibly volatile, and no, it's not the same as bipolar. So for fuck's sake.
People come in and they're very passionate about this particular aspect of their identity and they want to talk about it. Two things I articulate on that front is that fundamentally, first of all, you don't owe anyone a conversation about anything about who you are.
Yeah.
Sometimes there is this pressure being like, oh, if I'm this person, I have to be the person who talks about it. I have to be. You have to be the spokesperson for this issue. And I'm like, you don't. You don't owe anyone anything. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. And the second thing I say, because in particular about comedy, it's got to be funny. You still have to apply the baseline rules of comedy to any topic you wish to talk about.
I've talked about it a couple of times this season, so I'll keep it brief. But the equivalent of that in music is this expectation that your identity has to be a reflection of the genres that you do as an artist. So being Latino, I'm expected to make Latin music, which I do, but I don't exclusively do.
Yeah.
You know, being gay, I'm expected to make EDM club stuff, which I do, but not exclusively.
Yeah.
And it's really sad that, like, unfortunately, this notion of, you know, you don't owe anyone anything, which I very firmly believe in, is not supported in music. They are trying so hard to make it so that we're only going to support you if you're a stereotype, if you follow what we believe your stereotype to be. And I fucking hate that. But it's nice to know that, like, yeah, with comedy, live comedy, you can joke about whatever the fuck you want to joke about.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. I always think it's better when you don't have to limit yourself.
I would do stuff because it was getting rewarded with laughs, and that would indicate what I would do. And then I would spend a lot of time being like, well, I don't really enjoy doing that. Like, I can write that joke is funny and it works, but it doesn't bring me joy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get up on stage and be like, I'm excited to do this. This is what I do.
It doesn't do a Marie Kondo.
It doesn't Marie Kondo me. It doesn't. And like, that's the thing as well, because you can get laughs doing a lot of stuff. You can get laughs doing, as a gay man, if I walk on stage and go, ooh, I'll get a laugh. I can win over an audience by just acting slightly effeminate.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hack, and sometimes you get a rough crowd, and sometimes I'm like, you know what? I don't want to work for this. They're kind of really hostile. I don't want to do this. And
that's a good transition though into something we definitely have to touch on. Hecklers. Yeah.
Do you know they're quite rare in Australia?
Really?
So the hecklers you tend to deal with, and I say that from a place where I don't do necessarily like regional road shows.
Yeah.
So something about me. They don't want to book me for the RSL in Dubbo. I don't know why. I think I've just got like left-leaning face. Yeah. Like, people look at me and go, oh, he's left-leaning political comedian. I'm like, no, I'm just, I don't think I can walk along Oxford Street without being classed as a protest march. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think that's the vibe I give off. I say this with a pinch of salt, knowing this is not the full, I've not done every gig in Australia.
Yeah, and it's not everyone's experience either. No,
but hecklers in Australia are less, boo, you're not funny, and they're more yes-anders in the terms of, if you ask a question, they will answer you. Yeah. And sometimes you don't actually want them to answer you.
Because they don't understand that it's rhetorical.
So it's like, oh, has anyone here travel from interstate? And they're like, oh, yeah, I just came from Victoria. I was visiting my mum down in blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, okay. No. Oh, great. Like, or you get people who's like, woo! I love you. Like, it's actually rare to have someone be like, boo, I'm not happy.
Yeah.
Than to have someone who interrupts you because they are enthusiastic about talking to you. Because there's this weird dynamic.
That's so interesting.
Because comedy is so conversational. It's incredibly conversational. It's someone chatting to you. It feels like audiences learn about you and they feel like they're your friend.
Yeah.
Because you've talked to them for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour. And in that, you've had to express opinions, who you are as a person, your character, right? Sometimes you are a physical character. Sometimes the character is just a slightly different version of yourself on stage. And there's this weird power imbalance where I don't know anything about the audience members sitting in front of me, but they know a lot more about me. So there's this weird amicability. So sometimes when people are very swept up by that, they are more likely to try and communicate with you because it feels like a conversation. It wasn't for a negative way. It wasn't someone being like, oh, I hate who you are. I hate what you're saying. I hate this about you. Yeah. It's just people are not understanding the social construct.
Like, I I didn't pay to see left-leaning face.
She's giving left. She's giving lefty. I say this from a place of privilege as a male in the comedy industry.
Yeah, I was going to bring up how women definitely have it harder in live comedy.
100%. 100%.
And I was going to ask about, being proudly mixed race.
Going back to what you were saying earlier about the idea that you have to brand yourself to an identity comes from the business lens of the creative world, right? So it's how can we sell a product? The product needs to be articulated. How do we articulate that to the audiences? It has to be simple and it has to be a known.
Yeah.
So it's hard to pitch this alternative comedian who, uses circus-inspired music, juggling, opera, on rollerblades, blah, blah, and communicate as a product. Or I could take the person who is doing R&B and they fit the R&B stereotype and you go, this is an R&B singer. And people go, okay, I will buy tickets to an R&B singer. I like R&B and I know what I'm getting. You go business side, that makes sense. The negative impact of that is in the creative form, right? Where you don't necessarily have the freedom and flexibility to steer out of that until you have enough sway that your audiences follow you and not the idea of you. When it comes to having a mixed race identity, it's ironic because in theory, I should be the majority. I feel like there are very few people who are not mixed race, but it's actually very rare to find mixed race people who self-identify as such.
Yeah.
People will be like, oh, I'm first generation, or like, I'm Asian Australian, or blah, blah. But if you say, oh, you're mixed race, they'll be like, no. Because of that dynamic, as someone who is mixed race, I'm a very small minority. So as a product, I'm not as marketable because not many people identify with the mixed race experience, nor understand that, nor relate to it.
Yeah, people have a lot of like convoluted interpretations of what it means to be mixed race. Like I don't know, for the longest time it's because people want you to be one or the other. They don't like when you mix things together. Hence the whole like, let's put you in this very specific box where you can do one thing. They're trying to apply it to your identity as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm Peruvian, 100% Peruvian, because both my parents are, but I happen to be firstborn Australian. So it's like, yeah, just because I'm born here, like Australia's a nationality, guys. Like some people, I feel like they don't know that. It's not an ethnicity. It's not a heritage. Like it's a nationality. So I've had rants about this before where they want, like, as soon as you start talking about being a person of color or about race, they suddenly see you through a really white lens. They're like, oh no, you're white passing. It's like, bitch, I'm not. I've never been confused for being able to speak English, like in my existence on this fucking continent.
It's a very complicated subject in that respect, but my personal experience is that in the comedy industry, at least, of that kind of identity, it's hard for people to want to kind of invest and promote it because they would have to do such work in branding the idea of mixed raceness in the cultural zeitgeist for me to be a viable product.
Exactly.
But that doesn't necessarily stop me. I'll do it myself, but like I do everything myself. But in terms of how that impacts, it's not necessarily on a mainstream level. Sometimes it happens in progressive circles too. Like, for example, there was an event I did last year, a kind of an Asian focused event. And then the programmers for that Asian comedy show were like, went back through my agent to try and get an understanding of if I was Asian enough to join the Asian show. Because they were like, well, you don't look it. And this is me presuming. I don't know what they were for. But the in between the lines I read was, you don't look Asian enough. And you don't specifically pinpoint which Asian identity you are. Therefore, we need to vet you before we allow you into the Asian-only show. So
we need to vet you for the crimes of not being Asian enough.
Genuinely. So, like, sometimes it's not just like, it's hard to,
No, I basically get the same shit with, like, being Latino. Like, it's like, okay, like, my skin color isn't enough, my features aren't enough, my surname isn't enough. Like, the fuck do you want? Like, I can't call up my mom. She's dead. Sorry. Yeah.
You just the birth certificate's not enough. Nothing's enough.
Yeah.
But, I mean, what I like about that though is in terms of Australia, it's like I'm one of the few. There are other mixed race comedians. I'm definitely not the only one.
Yeah.
I'm 100% not saying that. I am the one, but I'm not the only one. But what I like about it is that very few people can steal my material. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
if you have a joke about your half Chinese, half Jamaican nan,
It leans itself into that wonderful concept of your uniqueness being your superpower. Like it is what separates you from everybody else. And yeah,
100%.
we love that.
Anyway, I feel like I've yarned your ear off with all of my philosophical musings about the comedy world.
We love it though. I'm here for that. It's fine. I'll deal with the aftermath of editing for
I
who
know.
knows how long. But
I talk heaps.
I do have one question before we
Yeah.
wrap up. All right. Being proudly mixed race, did you get any pushback from your family about pursuing comedy?
No, not really. I've been always very headstrong. I've been very independent from a young age.
And they just accepted that.
I am very like my family is like I love my family. They were quite supportive, but I am very not stubborn. I don't think stubborn's the right word, but I'm very headstrong. I was the kid that, you know, my parents had to get a leash for. So, you know, because you'd put me down and I'd run.
Oh, yeah. He was a runner.
I was a runner. Like my first day of school, my mum was like, it's first day of school. And I was like, bye. Bye, Felicia. What's this? What's that over there? Oh, cool. Shiny thing. All the way into my 20s. I was like, I never considered that other people have codependence on other people. Like I was like first time I got in the relationship I'm currently in now with my partner Luke, 7 years, and I didn't really understand how to kind of do it at the beginning because I was like, what do you mean I can't do what I want when I want?
No.
I'm very confused by this premise. Like,
No, oh my God. I'm literally this.
I've balanced out. I'm not a monster. I do inform and communicate.
Yeah, but it literally it takes time. Like you have to adjust.
Yeah.
Because I've been in my first healthy relationship for I want to say almost 5 months now, like 4 or 5 months. And it's not like I was opposed to anything. I was just I'm so used to being independent and career driven, and I'm very much a rebel. Because I was going to bring up the difference between support from our parents, because it's love that you had that.
I'm sorry that you did.
Whereas I had to fight every step of the way.
Yeah.
I was headstrong as well, but it turned into rebellion because my parents were completely against it. And I had to very much be like, well, fuck you, I'm doing this anyway. But it was a very different dynamic because they weren't exactly good people. So, yeah. And then, but with the relationship stuff, look, I very much like being an agent of chaos. I like being able to do what I want. But
I was chatting to a friend and she had been someone I call a serial monogamist. So since a teenager, she'd been in just relationship after relationship, kind of from the age of 16 to late 20s, had been in just 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 2 years. And then we were messaging one time and she was like, I just went out tonight and I didn't have to tell anyone. I'm like,
oh my God.
Yes. And I was like, what's your point? Water is drinkable. What next? You know what I mean? I was like, that is such a...
You have autonomy over your own body. You can get out of the house.
For him, it was a very revolutionary concept because their whole identity had been formed based on the other. There's a lot of presumed things in terms of relationship dynamics, and I'm a strong independent black woman. I'm a strong independent black woman. No, I know. It's going to sound way too corporate wellnessy, but I'm very much you have to communicate how you feel.
Communication is key.
Communication is key, but I think sometimes what people misinterpret that as being I find that annoying. You're annoying me, and but it's I just feel like we haven't seen each other. Shouldn't be a charged statement.
Exactly.
But sometimes those things, we can communicate those, but the emotions we attach is, you're saying I'm neglecting you. You're saying I'm a bad person.
That's because a lot of people haven't done enough self-work to really analyze things and realize that not everything's a personal attack.
Yeah. That's hard. No one's if we're not taught taxes, we're not taught emotional well-being.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
This is what I mean. Practicality, people. We should be taught this shit. Oh my God. But last question, and it's in regards to being a performing monkey. So what I mean by
that's a new slur. Wow. All right.
Whoa. Oh my
cancelled. Hashtag cancelled.
Okay.
Sorry, that was Set me up. I'm a comedian. Literally. Anyway.
So when you inform people you're a comedian,
Yes.
like when it arises in conversation, how often do you get, tell me a joke?
90% of the time.
Low, I knew it.
All the time.
I get this,
You get the same?
I get the sing something for
Sing
me.
something. And do you know why? Do you know my theory why? So singing and comedy are pretty much identical in this aspect. So there is this essence that when you say you're either a singer or a comedian, it's attached to the idea that you think you're the shit in that industry.
People
right?
are like, prove it.
If you are a guitarist, for example, people don't go, oh, you think you're a guitarist, do you? It's for some reason, I don't know why, but so if you think you're funny or if you think you can sing, it seems like a very pompous statement to make.
Yeah.
And the code for that is, I work in this, or I'm a comedian, or I'm a singer, and therefore it's like, oh, well, sorry, honey.
You think you're better than me?
It is a little bit like that. So the immediate reaction people go is, oh, prove it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it's just those two. You know, you don't see someone going like, even types of singing. You don't see someone who's like, I'm an opera singer. And then people get this immediate resentment and going, oh, all right, la-dee-da, sing me an aria. Like, you know, like it doesn't happen. It's like, oh, you're an accountant. It's like, oh.
Do my taxes.
Oh, great, yeah. You know what code to put in the superannuation form. Good for you.
It's so stupid. I love just coming back with a retort now. I'm on Spotify, look me up. And I'll be like, I'll literally say, oh, like hand me your phone. Like, do you have Spotify or Apple Music? And then I look myself up and I follow myself on their phone.
Oh, that's smart.
And I'm like, there, you want to hear me? Like, I resent this idea that I need to just suddenly perform for you. I'm a rebel at heart. I'm not doing what you say. Like, just straight up, okay? I'm much more likely to kick you in the fucking head. But
well, that's not the trait of a singer per se. That's just you're a singer, hey? Kick me in the head. Like that's maybe we could start that trend. I don't think it's gonna catch on.
I think it'd be so fun though.
I'm like the opposite. So I was like, oh, you're a comedian. I'm like, don't look me up. Please don't. The problem with comedy is it gets outdated very quickly. It's not like where you can go back and listen to like Adele's early album. It's like, oh, this is so cool. It's like, oh no, if you see someone's earlier joke, maybe it's about a topic that's so outdated that you watch it in the real time, like in the current day and age, you're like, why? Like, why are you so passionate about Guy Sebastian? Calm down. You know what I mean? Like, whatever, like, you know, like, you're like, that's so of that era.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Guy Sebastian's outdated, but I don't know him. I'm sure he's lovely. But, like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like you will talk about a topic. Like, I used to have jokes around Israel Folau, and I just fingers crossed every day I scroll on ABC to see if he said something problematic so I can bring out this set again. Like, if I brought it out tonight on stage, people were like, why are you so angry? Like, it needs relevance.
Yeah.
It's in response to something.
Yeah.
So I can't just go... So, but when he does pop off, I'm like, yes, I can bring out this like 7-minute set that I worked really hard on that crushes. But until then, like, you know, so if you Google me, sometimes you might get a video from a few years ago and they're versions of the joke that were like very early on. So they weren't perfected or polished, things that seem a bit outdated. But you watch it in the real time, you judge backwards.
Yeah.
You don't go, it was 2018, so we should take that with a pinch of salt because the things were happening in 2018 were very different now. We haven't had COVID and blah, blah, blah. No, you go, oh, that's a bit old. Like, you know what I mean? So I'm like, don't look me up.
Yeah. I think that pretty much concludes this episode on live comedy. You do have your own podcast, I believe.
I do. It's called Floof. Floof with AJ Lamarque. There's a whole back catalogue of different topics from sexology to flamenco to crowdfunding, Doctor Who. Like, it's very eclectic.
Yeah.
But it's great. So you can just kind of scroll through subjects.
Yeah.
So yeah, check that out.
Awesome. So yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here, Mr. AJ Lamarque.
Thank you so much.
This has been Sabotage. We can cut it. Beatrix and Katya.
Oh yeah.
There's
so many people who do that. The woman from I'm a Celebrity also does it as well. It's Julia Wilson. No, what's her name?
Yeah.
Julia Morris.
Yeah, I work on their promos.
Oh yeah. She's like, I'm amateur detective turned pediatrician. Julia.